They called my name, and the room forgot to breathe. The spotlight found me, a sharp, wide truth cutting through golden glass. It held me there unblinking. Every fork froze. Every whisper stalled midair. The chandeliers trembled like they knew something the crowd did not. I stood, silk brushed against my knees. The chairs scraped the floor like a confession. Somewhere, a spoon rang once, a small, accidental prayer. I didn't look at anyone. Not yet. I only looked at the stage, at the place I swore I'd never stand again. My daughter turned first. Red dress, painted smile, eyes caught between love and warning. Her hand found her husband's sleeve. He whispered something that looked calm and smelled like fear. The host's voice floated through the hush. Please welcome, but I was already walking. The carpet drank the sound of my steps. Perfume, champagne, and curiosity tangled in the air. I felt the weight of 100 stories pressing against my back, most of them wrong. It didn't matter. Tonight they would hear mine. At the foot of the stairs, I touched a brass rail. Cool, honest. It steadied me the way truth sometimes does. Only when it's too late to turn away. I climbed. The light grew hotter with each step until it hummed in my bones. I reached a podium, let the host retreat, and waited for the silence to settle. You don't rush a silence that's about to change a life. Good evening, I said. My voice didn't echo, it landed. Soft, deliberate, older than regret. A ripple moved through sequins and tuxedos. Curiosity tilted its head. I won't keep you long, I said. Only long enough to unlock something. The word unlock drew a breath from somewhere near the bar. People know when a door is about to open, they just never expect to be inside the room. This isn't a speech, I said. It's a key. The spotlight pulsed. The violinist's bow wavered midair. My daughter's smile stiffened, her eyes asking questions I'd waited 40 years to answer. You once told me, I said quietly, that some names don't belong in bright rooms. Her head tilted, almost pleading. I smiled, a small, tired smile that knew too much. Maybe you were right, I whispered. Maybe this one never did. I opened my hand. The envelope inside caught the light, thin paper. Thick silence. The same handwriting she'd never recognized. This, I said, was written before you were born. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Quick and electric. My daughter froze, the color draining from her lips. I looked at her, not with anger, not with triumph, only with the kind of mercy that hurts more than blame. Shall we? I asked, and touched a seal. The paper cracked. The room broke with it. The paper tore like a whisper that had waited too long. A dry sound, small, but it reached every corner of the room. I unfolded it carefully, corners soft, ink fading where tears once lived. The stage lights caught the edges, turning them to gold dust. And for a moment, even the air listened. This letter, I said quietly, was never meant to be read by strangers. My voice trembled, not from nerves, but from recognition. I had spoken this truth only in my dreams. Now it wanted witnesses. The crowd leaned forward as one. A single heartbeat, shared between too many bodies. I glanced down at the handwriting, steady, elegant, his. Even after all these years, I could still smell the cologne that used to live in that ink. I was 24 when this was written, I said, and I was already a mother. A ripple, a soft gasp somewhere near the back. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. Their silence was answer enough. I was told, I continued, to keep quiet, to protect someone's name, to bury my own. I looked at my daughter then. Her eyes wide, frantic, searched my face for the woman she'd always assumed I was. But that woman was gone. This one had come to finish what silence began. You see, I said softly, there was another before you. The orchestra's breath caught, even the violins forgot their tuning. My daughter's painted smile cracked, a thin fissure down the center of her composure. Her husband's hand reached for hers, but she didn't take it. The letter trembled in my hands. The paper remembered every fold, every secret. I read the first line aloud. To the child I will never get to name. The room broke open. Chairs shifted. A collective exhale cut short. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as if light itself understood. I paused, not to create drama, but to find my breath again. It had been gone for decades, He wrote this, I said, the day before he left. Not for war, not for glory, just to disappear. My daughter's eyes filled, but no tears fell. Tears were too honest for her world. I folded the paper halfway, my thumb resting over his signature. His name, I said, voice thin but steady, was the name I was told to erase, the name that could ruin everything. A long silence spread like snowfall over something sacred. My parents made me choose, I said, almost to myself. Keep the child, or keep the reputation. No one moved. No one breathed. I chose him, I whispered, and still they took him away. The lights flickered once, soft and trembling as if even electricity flinched at the truth. And now, I said, straightening the paper, I will speak the name that was never allowed to live. My throat tightened around the word, the one I hadn't said aloud in 40 years. It burned and bloomed at the same time. Daniel, a name too simple for the damage it carried, too small for the hole it left behind. I looked up, directly at my daughter. Your brother, I said. The room gasped again, louder this time. Real, unfiltered, human. I laid the letter gently on the podium. I was told, I said, that silence would protect us. A pause, a breath, a truth. But silence doesn't protect. It just buries the living alongside the dead. And with that, I folded the paper once, twice, and pressed it flat beneath my palm. The orchestra didn't dare breathe. The host stood frozen at the edge of the stage, eyes wide. My daughter stared at me, her face broken open between disbelief and something older than anger. I smiled, faint and tired. You see, I said, voice trembling now, reputation was never the only thing we lost. The crowd murmured a slow, spreading wave of sorrow and awe. And then, quieter, to her alone, now you understand what it costs to erase a name. I stepped back from the microphone, the paper still trembling in my hand, and whispered to the room that had become a witness. Truth always finds the stage. The name hung there, Daniel.it floated in the air like smoke that refused to fade. For a long aching moment, no one moved. Not the host, not the orchestra, not even my daughter. Then, somewhere near the back, a chair creaked. It sounded louder than thunder. I didn't look at anyone. My eyes stayed on the paper, its edges trembling in the soft current of the air vents above. It felt alive again, the way the past sometimes wakes up when it hears its own name. When they took him, I said quietly, they told me to forget. They told me to build a different story. One with clean edges. One that would make people proud. The microphone caught the crack in my voice and carried it gently through the room. I did what I was told, I went on. I smiled. I learned to speak like a woman who'd never broken. I wore the right dresses. I attended the right events. And I raised you. I looked at her now, to be everything I was not allowed to be. My daughter's lips parted, but no words came out. Her painted composure had cracked, and through it, I saw something small, something frightened. A child's confusion hiding behind a woman's armor. You thought I was embarrassed by you, I said softly. But the truth, my dear, is that I was terrified. Terrified that if the world looked too closely at me, it would see the outline of the child I lost. Inside you, a murmur rose through the crowd, the kind of sound that carries no judgment, only sorrow. I took a breath, slow, careful, and it came out sounding older than I remembered. I wanted to tell you, I said, every year on your birthday. But every time I tried, I saw his face instead of yours. And guilt has a way of making a mother mute. I placed the letter down gently on the podium. It didn't feel like paper anymore. It felt like forgiveness waiting to happen. He would be 50 now, I whispered. Older than you. Wiser, maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe he would have made the same mistakes we all did, trying to trade love for approval. My daughter's face folded, not into anger, not yet, but into something smaller, trembling. She blinked hard, and for the first time, her mascara forgot to stay strong. I didn't come here to hurt you, I said. I came because I realized too late that the truth doesn't die quietly. It claws its way out, even if it has to come through the mouth of an old woman under too bright lights. The orchestra still hadn't moved. The violinist's hand hovered midair, frozen between two notes that no longer mattered. Mother. The word slipped out of her like it hadn't been used in years. Soft, fragile. It landed between us and broke open everything silence had built. I smiled, not triumph, not pity, just recognition. That's the first time you've called me that in months, I said. She shook her head. Why now? Why? Here? I glanced out at the crowd. All those perfect strangers holding their breaths for a story that wasn't theirs. Because, I said, we spend our lives performing our best selves, but we are healed only when someone finally sees the broken one. Her eyes shimmered. The kind of tears you don't hide because they don't belong to shame. They belong to truth. I reached into the small wooden box beside the letter and opened it. Inside, a single blue ribbon faded, frayed, folded too many times. He was wrapped in this, I said quietly. The night they took him. The crowd exhaled. A soft, collective sigh like a prayer that didn't need words. I lifted the ribbon slowly, its color barely alive. It shimmered once under the light, trembling between my fingers like the past finally letting go. And then, gently, I placed it over the letter. Blue on white, memory on truth. This is all I have left of him, I said. And tonight, I'm giving it back to the world. The audience stood, not clapping, not cheering, just standing. A quiet uprising of respect. I looked at my daughter one last time. Her lips trembled around a word she hadn't yet found the courage to say. You don't have to speak, I told her softly. Just listen, because for 40 years, that's all this truth ever wanted. I took a step back from the microphone. The spotlight followed, reluctant to let me go. Behind me, the screen flickered, a single photograph appearing, grainy, old, almost lost to time. A baby in a blue blanket. Gasps filled the room again. Even my daughter couldn't look away, and I whispered, more to the picture than to anyone else. Welcome home, my boy. The photograph flickered once, and then went dark. The spotlight held on me, stubborn, like it hadn't realized the story was already finished. People were still standing, a room full of strangers, each one holding their own breath like it might break something sacred if released too soon. I exhaled first, a slow, quiet surrender. Then I did what no one expected. I stepped away from the podium. No bow, no tears, no grand closing line. Just the sound of my shoes finding the floor again. My daughter stood as I passed. Her face pale, unguarded, was a painting half wiped clean. No red carpet smile now. Just a child's face, lost in a woman's war paint. Mom, she whispered. But the word broke before it reached the air. I didn't stop. Not because I didn't hear her. Because if I did, I would shatter too. The cameras turned to follow. Their lenses trembled like they didn't know if this was tragedy or salvation. The orchestra lowered their bows, the violins sighing in their wooden throats. Somewhere near the back, someone began to clap softly, unsure. Then another, and another. Not applause, not approval. Something else, something like prayer. By the time I reached the edge of the stage, I could feel my heartbeat in the soles of my feet. It wasn't fear, it was release. I paused at the stairs, hand brushing the brass rail again, the same one I'd touched on the way up. Cold earlier, warm now, as if it remembered me. I looked back once. My daughter was still frozen in place, her husband whispering her name like it might glue her together. But she didn't answer him. She only stared at the letter and the ribbon still lying on the podium. Two small, quiet ghosts under the bright lights. I walked down the stairs, one careful step at a time. The room began to move again, people whispering, shifting, unsure whether they had just witnessed a confession, a performance, or a resurrection. I reached a side door. A staff member tried to stop me. Ma'am, are you all right? But I smiled. The kind of smile that makes people step aside without knowing why. The hallway beyond the ballroom was dim and mercifully empty. I could still hear the muffled hum of voices behind me, the sound of reputation collapsing, and something truer trying to take its place. My hands were trembling now. I looked down at them, veins, lines, all the roads I'd taken to get here. They didn't look old tonight. They looked turned. Behind me, a door opened. Footsteps, fast ones. Mom. Her voice. No microphone now. Just her raw, human, real. I turned. She was standing halfway down the hallway, makeup streaked, breath caught in small gasps. The mask was gone, and underneath it my little girl, the one who used to reach for my hand in church when the hymns got too loud. For a moment, neither of us moved. The space between us felt like a lifetime stretched thin. Then she said it again, quieter this time. "Mom, please." Her voice cracked open, and all the years between us spilled out. I didn't rush to her. We'd both been running too long. But I took one step forward, then another. When I reached her, she just stood there, a woman still learning how to be a daughter again. "I didn't know," she whispered. Her mascara had bled down to her chin, the red of her lipstick now smeared into something painfully human. "No," I said softly. "You weren't supposed to. That was my mistake." She shook her head. "I thought you were ashamed of me." I smiled, small and sad. "No, my love. I was ashamed of the silence." She bit her lip, as if trying to hold the apology inside her mouth before it turned into sobs. "I don't even know how to fix this," she said. "You start," I said, "by listening to the parts that hurt." A tear slipped down her cheek. It landed on the marble floor between us, the tiniest sound, but it echoed like thunder. We stood there in the half-dark, two women who had run out of ways to pretend, and for the first time in decades. We didn't need the stage to speak the truth. She reached out, hesitated, then took my hand. Not the way adults shake hands, but the way children hold on like they're afraid the world might steal the moment away. I let her. The ballroom doors opened again somewhere down the corridor. The host's voice echoed faintly, calling for calm, for music, for control. But the real story had already left the room. She squeezed my hand. "Mom," she whispered again, voice trembling but alive. "Tell me everything." And I did what every mother eventually has to do. I told the truth this time, not to the crowd, but to the only person who still mattered. We stepped outside. The night met us like an old friend who still remembered how we used to laugh. Cool air, a moon that looked too gentle for the things it had just witnessed. The city lights below blinked not in judgment, but in quiet curiosity. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. My daughter let go of my hand, only to cross her arms like she was cold, though I could tell it wasn't the wind. The night had teeth, but guilt has sharper ones. "Why tonight?" she asked finally. Her voice was small, raw, like she hadn't used it for honesty in years. "You could have told me at home, privately. Why make the whole world see it?" I turned toward her, the ballroom's muffled applause still faint in the distance, not for me, but for whatever came next. I smiled faintly, because home stopped being a safe place for truth a long time ago. She looked down, shame flickering across her face like shadow through stained glass. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. Her voice cracked in the middle, the sound of pride surrendering. I thought appearances mattered. I thought if I could be perfect, you'd finally be proud." I took a slow step closer, the kind of step that has nothing to do with movement and everything to do with forgiveness. "My darling," I said, "I was proud of you before the world ever was, but I wasn't loud about it." She laughed once, short, painful, and wet with tears. "You were never loud about anything." "No," I said softly. "That's how I survived." She turned toward me, eyes red, and for a moment, the wind caught her hair the same way it used to when she was 12, that little girl spinning in circles under the spring rain, not caring who was watching. I saw her again in this woman who had forgotten how to be small. "I wanted you to have everything I couldn't," I said, "but in doing so, I forgot to give you the one thing that matters most." She frowned. "What's that?" "The truth." Her lips trembled. "And the letter?" "That was him." "My brother?" I nodded. "Yes." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Did you love him?" "I still do," I said. "Every morning when I wake up, he's the first name in my prayers. Every night, he's the reason I forgive myself enough to sleep." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I didn't even know he existed. That's why I chose tonight," I said, "to let him exist again." We stood there, mother and daughter, under the kind of silence that doesn't suffocate but soothes. Behind us, the ballroom music began again, false laughter, clinking glasses, the orchestra pretending nothing had happened. But we both knew it had. Something sacred had cracked open, and nothing could fit back the same way. After a long pause, she said, "What happened to him?" I looked up at the sky, where the moon had started to hide behind a passing cloud. "When he was born," I began, "I was told he wouldn't survive without help. Help that required a name on a document, a father's name. But his father—" I stopped. The word scraped on the way out. His father already belonged to someone else. Her eyes widened, not with judgment but sorrow. I went on. "When they found out, they told me he would ruin everything. My future, my career, my family's reputation, and you believed them," she whispered. I nodded slowly. I was 24, and I thought love meant sacrifice. So I signed a paper I didn't understand. Her voice broke. "You gave him up?" "Yes," I said, "and I never forgave myself. Until tonight." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "Why tell me like that? In front of everyone?" I looked straight into her eyes, the same color as his. "Because you reminded me of them." She frowned. "Who?" "The people who made me choose silence." She froze. The wind stopped moving, and I saw it, the realization settle in her face, slow and devastating. "You became them," I said gently. "You started protecting your image the same way they made me protect mine." Her breath hitched. She looked away, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I know," I said. "That's why I forgave you before you ever said sorry." She covered her face, and the sob finally came, the kind that shakes your shoulders and makes the night lean in closer. I didn't say anything. I just reached out and pulled her against me, her head on my chest, my hand in her hair. She didn't resist. Not this time. The city kept breathing. The world kept spinning. But for us, time stopped, a mother and daughter standing in the quiet middle of everything broken, finding warmth again in the coldest truth. After a while, she whispered into my shoulder, "What happens now?" I smiled through the tears. "We go home," I said. "But not to the one with walls." She pulled back, eyes searching mine. "Then where?" "To the one with honesty," I said. "And maybe we start building that together." The drive home was quiet. No music, no words, just the hum of tires and the steady sound of her breathing beside me, and even, but honest. Streetlights passed in flashes across the windshield, like small, forgiving ghosts showing us the way. She kept her eyes forward. I kept mine on the road. Sometimes forgiveness starts that way, not with a conversation, but with two people silently choosing not to run anymore. When we reached a house, the porch light was still on. It had always stayed on, even when no one came. Old habits of mothers, I suppose. We leave lights burning for the people who might return, even if we stopped believing they would. She hesitated at the front steps, her red gown dragging softly against the old wood. This was the same house she'd grown up in, the same door she used to slam when she was 16, the same railing she used to cry against when she thought love had left her. But tonight, the house looked different. Or maybe we did. "Do you want to come in?" I asked. She nodded, and the wordless understanding between us was enough. Inside, the air was thick with the faint scent of lavender and old books. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked its steady, patient rhythm, a reminder that time forgives no one, but it sometimes lets you try again. She sat at the dining table, her hands flat on the wood where I'd once taught her to count, to write, to pray. She looked around like a stranger in her own childhood. "Maybe she was. This place," she whispered. "I used to think it was too small." "It's not the walls," I said softly. "It's the silence that makes a home feel smaller." She lowered her head, a tear catching on her lip before falling onto the table. It landed beside a small scratch, the same one she made as a child, when she'd carved her initials too deep. Funny how the house never healed from that either. I walked to the cabinet in the corner, the one no one ever touched. Inside, behind a stack of yellowed envelopes, was a small box wrapped in an old scarf, the same shade of blue as the ribbon I'd shown her tonight. When I set it on the table, she looked at it like it might breathe. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything I couldn't tell you," I said. Her eyes flicked from the box to my face, searching. "I don't think I'm ready," she whispered. "No one ever is," I said. "Truth waits for the brave, not the prepared." I unwrapped the scarf. slow, deliberate. Inside were photographs. Not many, just 3. One of me holding a newborn, eyes swollen from both joy and shame. One of my parents, formal, stern, their smiles pressed thin for the camera. And one of a man, the man who had written the letter. Daniel's father. My daughter's breath caught. That's him? Yes, I said. She studied the photo like she was trying to read an entire lifetime in his eyes. He looks kind. He was, I said. But kindness isn't always courage. He loved me, but he loved his comfort more. She nodded, her voice trembling. That sounds like me. I smiled, sad and knowing. We inherit more than faces, darling. She reached for the baby's photograph, her fingers brushing the edge. He looks peaceful, she said. He was, I whispered. For 2 days. She looked up sharply, her mouth opening, but no sound came. 2 days was all it took for a secret to become a lifetime. They didn't even let me bury him, I said, my voice barely more than air. They said it was better to move on, to pretend it hadn't happened, that I could start fresh. I met her eyes, the same color, the same fire. But you can't build a fresh life on top of a grave, love. Eventually, the ground sinks. She covered her mouth, a sob slipping through the cracks of her fingers. I didn't stop her. Tears are the way truth cleans the room. After a while, she whispered, I think I know now why you did it tonight. You didn't want me to keep burying things the way you did. I nodded. Yes, because secrets aren't coffins, they're seeds. And they grow into shame if you don't pull them out. Her eyes softened. The kind of soft that only comes after breaking. She reached across the table, her hand finding mine. Her fingers were warm, strong, the kind that could finally carry a truth without dropping it. What do we do now? She asked. We start again, I said. But this time, we tell the truth from the beginning. Outside. The first hint of dawn brushed against the window's gray, forgiving, alive. The world hadn't ended. It had only begun to remember us. We sat there in the quiet glow. 2 women surrounded by ghosts that had finally learned how to rest, and for the first time in years, the house felt full again. The light had changed. It wasn't night anymore, but morning hadn't quite decided to arrive. The kind of hour where even the walls hold their breath, unsure if it's time to forget or remember. We sat there for a long while, our hands still touching across the table. The air was thick with lavender and grief, soft, familiar. Not cruel anymore. Then she spoke, quietly. Is that all of him? Her eyes drifted to the small blue box between us. No, I said. There's one more thing. I turned the box slowly and reached for the hidden compartment underneath. It clicked, a sound so small and final it made us both flinch. Inside was something tiny, wrapped in tissue. I unfolded it carefully, the way you would unwrap a memory that still bleeds. A silver locket. Old, faded, the engraving almost gone. It had survived fires and floods of tears. I placed it in her palm. She turned it over gently, her thumb tracing the faint scratches where time had refused to be erased. It's empty, she whispered. No, I said softly. Look closer. She pressed the clasp open. Inside, barely visible through the years of wear, was a lock of hair, pale, soft, curled like a question mark. And next to it, the smallest photograph you could imagine, a baby. Daniel. Her lips parted. She didn't speak. She couldn't. For a long time she just stared, the weight of that little face settling into her hands like something sacred and unbearably light. He had your eyes, I whispered. The same way you have mine. Her throat tightened. Her tears came fast, falling straight onto the metal, dotting it like rain. She didn't wipe them away. Tears belong where truth lives. After a moment, she looked at me. Why did you keep it hidden for so long? Because I thought I didn't deserve to hold it, I said. I thought love meant silence. That protecting you meant erasing him. Her fingers closed around the locket, protective, almost maternal. Maybe he stayed hidden because he was waiting for both of us to find him. I smiled, small, proud, trembling. You sound like him. Did he cry? She asked softly. Yes, I said, but not for long. Her breath hitched. Was he in pain? I shook my head. No, he left the way he arrived, peacefully, as if he already knew he wasn't meant to stay. The clock in the hall ticked louder, each second gentler than the last. The house, once filled with shame, now hummed with release. I used to dream about him, I said quietly. Not his face, just a feeling of holding something that didn't judge me. She nodded slowly, her thumb still circling the locket. I think I've felt that too, holding my own guilt, pretending it was ambition. Guilt and ambition wear the same shoes, I said. They both run from truth. She laughed through her tears, a fragile, trembling sound. Then I suppose I've been running a marathon. I reached across the table again and took her hand. The locket glimmered between our palms. It felt warm, now alive even. Every mother leaves something unfinished, I said. Mine left me silence. I left you shame. But maybe you'll leave your daughter something lighter. Her head tilted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have a daughter. I smiled. Not yet. She stared at me, the idea flickering behind her eyes. The first spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Outside, the first ray of sunlight slipped through the window. It landed right on the locket, turning it into a drop of fire between us. She lifted it gently and placed it around her neck. The clasp clicked shut, a sound small as forgiveness, loud as resurrection. I exhaled. Now he's where he always belonged, I said. She looked down at the locket resting against her heart, then back at me. Thank you, she whispered, for letting him live again. I reached over and brushed a tear from her cheek. No, I said softly. You did that. You listened. The morning light spread further, now gold over the curtains, warm over the photographs on the wall. The house was no longer haunted. It was home again, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a woman with secrets. I felt like a mother with two children, one gone, and one finally found. Morning had fully arrived. Not loud or hurried, but slow, golden, and merciful. The kind of morning that doesn't ask questions. It just listens. The house felt different. Not cleaner, not newer, just lighter. As if every shadow had finally decided it had done its job and could rest. My daughter sat by the window, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands, the locket glinting against her skin every time she moved. It was strange how such a small thing could change the way she held herself. Her shoulders softer now, her breath longer, her eyes no longer glass, but water, moving, reflecting. She looked outside for a long time before she spoke. The world looks smaller today, she said. No, I replied. You just finally fit inside it. She smiled faintly, but real. Last night feels like a dream. Then maybe you're finally awake. Her gaze drifted to the framed photographs on the wall, me at her age. Her as a child. The two of us once inseparable. Before ambition began to sound more like love than love itself. She shook her head softly. I used to think reputation was everything. I wanted people to look at me and see someone important. They did, I said. They just couldn't see the parts that mattered. She exhaled. Do you think they'll talk about what happened? At the gala? They'll talk, I said. They always do. But for once, they'll be talking about something true. She laughed quietly, a sound that startled both of us. It had been years since her laughter didn't sound rehearsed. Then her voice softened. I've been thinking, she said. I want to start something. Something? A scholarship, she said. In his name. Daniel Hayes Foundation for Children Who Don't Get to Be Remembered. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Grief and pride don't coexist easily. But sometimes they shake hands. That, I said slowly, is the most beautiful way to make him live again. She nodded. And for the first time since the night began, she looked steady, like a woman who finally understood the difference between being admired and being seen. She stood, walked toward the old piano in the corner, the one her father used to play before life got too busy for music. Her fingers brushed the keys, then pressed one soft and sure. The note trembled in the air. Then another followed. And another. A melody, fragile, hesitant, but alive. I closed my eyes and listened. The house hadn't heard music in years. Now it filled every room like forgiveness. When the song faded, she turned to me. I don't know how to be different, she said. I've lived too long pretending. You don't have to know. I told her. You just have to stop pretending. She nodded. The simplicity of that truth settled between us. like sunlight on an old floor, something ordinary, but holy. Then she said, "I wish I could have met him." "You will," I said, "in every act of kindness you do from now on. That's how the lost find their way back." She reached across the room and took my hand again. Her fingers were firm this time, the kind of grip that belongs to someone ready to carry something real. Outside, a sparrow landed on the railing, small, brown, ordinary, but it sang like it had been waiting for us to listen. We stood there in the quiet, two women finally free of roles, names, and masks, just mother and daughter, breathing the same air again. The locket glimmered once more in the morning light. It wasn't a symbol of sorrow anymore. It was a pulse, a promise. And somewhere deep inside me, I heard Daniel's laughter, not as memory, but as music that had never really stopped playing. A week passed, but it felt like years had folded themselves into those quiet 7 days. The story had already spread. Headlines, photos, the kind that live for 24 hours and die by morning, but not this time. This one stayed. It wasn't scandal, it was truth. And truth never leaves quietly. They wanted statements, interviews, apologies. But she said none of those things. Instead, she went silent, a silence the world didn't know how to read. It wasn't guilt. It was becoming. On the 8th day, she called me. "Will you come with me?" she asked. "To where?" "To the museum." It was early when we arrived, the kind of early that belongs to cleaners and morning light. The building was still closed to the public, but she had arranged it. Her world still had doors that opened for her. In the main gallery, under the tall glass dome, stood an empty pedestal, a spotlight already waiting, the way it does when it knows something important is about to return. She set down a small brass plaque. Her hands were shaking. I didn't help her. Some things a person must do themselves to truly heal. She knelt, took a breath, and pressed the plaque into place. When she stood again, I read the words, "In memory of Daniel Hayes, 1975-1975, for all the names the world forgot to say aloud." No flourish, no self-promotion, just truth, soft, bare, enough. I felt my throat tighten. She looked at me and smiled through tears. "I don't need an award anymore," she said. "I just need him to have a place." I nodded slowly. "This," I said, "is better than any gala." She laughed quietly, a sound half joy, half grief. "The irony," she said. "A week ago, I thought reputation was legacy. And now," she looked at the plaque again, her reflection small and trembling in the polished brass. "Now I know legacy is just love that outlives us." I reached out and touched her shoulder. "You've learned faster than I did." She turned to me. "You gave me the lesson. I just rewrote the ending." I smiled. And something inside me, something that had been locked away for 40 years, finally unclenched. It wasn't triumph. It was peace. The kind that hums softly instead of shouting. A janitor passed by, nodded respectfully, and kept sweeping. I watched him glance once at the plaque as he walked. He slowed down, read the name, and then smiled, small, sincere. A stranger remembering someone he never knew. That's how legacy begins. Not with fame, but with recognition. We stood there a little longer, the morning light crawling across the marble floor like forgiveness, finally learning how to walk. After a while, I said, "You know, he'd have been proud of you." She looked at me, tears shining but steady. "I think he already is." We left the museum together, not arm in arm, but side by side. Equals, finally. Two women carrying the same name without shame. Outside, the city was waking. The air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet, a clean kind of promise. To the crosswalk, she turned to me. "I've been thinking about changing the company's name," she said. "To what?" She smiled. "Hayes & Co. Simple, honest, no more pretending." I laughed, a soft, astonished laugh. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said, "because this time, it's real." The light changed. We stepped forward together through the morning traffic, into a life that finally belonged to both of us. And as we crossed the street, the wind caught the locket around her neck, lifting it just enough to catch the sunlight. For a split second, it glowed, and I swear, if you'd been close enough, you might have heard a little boy's laugh in the wind between us. A month passed, The world kept moving, as it always does, but for the first time in decades. We weren't chasing it. We were walking beside it, calm, steady, unafraid of being seen exactly as we were. The scholarship was already live. Applications came in by the hundreds, letters from young artists, writers, dreamers, kids with too much heart and too little luck. The kind of children the world doesn't usually save a seat for. Every morning, she sent me one or two to read. She'd underline lines that reminded her of Daniel. Sometimes she'd circle a sentence and write, "This one feels like him." It became our quiet ritual. Coffee, sunlight, and the voices of children who hadn't yet learned how cruel silence can be. And every time I saw her handwriting in the margins, something in me healed. Because those were the same hands that once pushed me away, now writing hope in blue ink. One afternoon, she arrived at my door unannounced. No red lipstick, no camera-ready poise, just jeans, a white shirt, and peace. "I thought you might like to see this," she said, holding up a folder. Inside was a brochure, glossy but simple. The Daniel Hayes Foundation. Underneath the title, a tagline she'd chosen herself. "Where forgotten names find their echo." I traced the words with my fingers and felt the tears come, soft and grateful. "I think he's found his echo already," I said. She smiled. "So have we." We sat on the porch after that, two women watching the evening fold itself neatly into night. Cicadas sang. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked once, then thought better of it. The world was exactly as it should be, ordinary and whole. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. I looked at her. Regret what? Keeping the truth for so long. I thought about it for a long while. "I used to," I said finally. "But not anymore." "Why?" "Because I learned something." I smiled faintly. The truth doesn't die in silence, it waits. And when it's ready, it chooses the right moment to speak. She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I think I believe that now." The porch light flickered, a moth brushing against the glass, gentle and relentless. It reminded me of something my mother used to say. "Even small wings can disturb the dark." I turned to her. "You're doing good work." She laughed lightly. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised," I said. "Just proud in a way that doesn't need to be hidden anymore." We sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't sting. The kind that feels like home. Then out of nowhere she whispered, "Mom?" "Yes?" "I think I forgive you." The words landed softly, but they shook the air between us. I didn't cry, not yet. Some feelings are too sacred for tears. I reached for her hand. It was warm, strong, no longer a stranger's. "Thank you," I said quietly. "But the truth is, I forgave myself first so I could still be here to hear you say that." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We watched a horizon blush in shades of gold and violet. Somewhere behind us, the clock in the hallway began to chime. Every sound felt earned, and in that moment, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to before. Peace doesn't arrive with a shout. It comes quietly. On nights like this, when love and loss finally stop arguing and start holding hands. That night, after she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full, like every wall had exhaled at last. I made tea and sat by the window. The moon hung low, soft and forgiving, as if it knew the weight it had watched me carry all these years. The cup steamed between my palms. Old hands, but steady. Across the street, someone's porch light flickered on, and I thought of Daniel again, how I used to imagine a light just like that guiding him wherever he went. Maybe he'd found it now. Maybe he was it. I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched since the night he died. The pages smelled of dust and lavender. And I wrote. Not a confession, not a eulogy, just a letter. "My dear boy, I don't write to you with sorrow anymore. I write with gratitude. Because losing you taught me how to keep love alive in the quiet. And because of you, she finally learned what love really is." She said your name today, Daniel, out loud, in sunlight. You would have liked her laugh. It sounds like mine did before the world told me to hush. We're learning together now. No masks, no performance. Just the fragile, beautiful truth of who we are. And I think, if heaven has mornings, you must be smiling at how small the distance feels tonight. I closed the journal and left it open on the table, pages breathing. Outside, the first breeze of autumn slipped through the screen door, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere, an owl called out low, deliberate, like a benediction. I whispered to the dark, "He's home." And for once, the silence answered kindly. The next morning, she came back, coffee in hand, hair unbrushed, barefoot on the porch. She didn't knock. She didn't have to. She just opened the door and said, "I couldn't sleep. Thought maybe we could start the day together." And we did. The simplest morning of our lives. 2 mugs, 2 open windows, one soft hum of peace between us. And no speeches, no makeup, no ghosts. Just mother and daughter, finally belonging to the same truth. I've learned that love doesn't need witnesses to be real. It doesn't demand applause or permission. It just asks that, when it finally knocks again, you don't pretend not to hear it, because when you open the door, even after all the years and all the silence, love still knows your name. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive like thunder. It doesn't kick the door open or demand to be seen. It just slips in quietly, through the same cracks grief once used to get in. The days have grown slower now. We spend mornings tending to the small garden out back, the one Daniel never saw, but somehow feels a part of. His name rests on a simple stone by the rosebush. No dates. Just, he was loved. Every time my daughter waters the flowers, she brushes her fingers over the words. Not like a ritual, more like a promise. And sometimes when the sunlight hits the petals just right, the blue ribbon on her wrist gleams like a heartbeat. We don't talk much about the past anymore. Not because it hurts, but because it finally doesn't need to. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding. There are still days when silence visits, soft and familiar. But now, it sits beside us at the table. Not between us. I've stopped trying to fill it. She's stopped trying to run from it. We've both learned that silence doesn't mean nothing, it just means everything has finally been said. Sometimes she still gets letters from the scholarship students' children who start their notes with, "I thought my name didn't matter." She always answers them the same way. Every name matters. You just need someone brave enough to say it. I watch her live now, unafraid to be ordinary, unafraid to be honest. And in her laughter, I hear echoes of a little boy I never got to raise. Maybe that's how the universe balances itself, by giving us back what we lost, just in a different form. The world has quieted, and in the quiet, I finally understand something. The truth was never meant to hurt us. It was meant to free us, to remind us that love, when hidden, rots, but when spoken, blooms. I close my eyes sometimes and picture that night at the gala, the lights, the faces, the shock. It doesn't haunt me anymore, because I see it now for what it was. Not a moment of shame, but of resurrection. A woman finally opening the door she'd spent her whole life guarding, and what walked through that door wasn't judgment. It was love, unashamed, unfiltered, alive. If I've learned anything, it's this. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop protecting their pain and start telling the truth about it, because the truth doesn't erase what happened, it redeems it. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes who we become because of it. And love, real love, isn't about keeping secrets safe. It's about letting the truth finally breathe. The night ends the way all stories should, quietly, honestly, and with one lesson that will outlive us both. When you speak the truth with love, it doesn't shatter the world. It sets it free. Spring came early that year. The earth, still damp with yesterday's rain, smelled of new beginnings. The air was light, the kind of lightness that happens after a house has finally told the truth. We stood in the garden again. The roses were taller now, their roots deep and unafraid. The stone with Daniel's name was nearly hidden beneath petals, and in front of it, a small sapling waited in the soil, its thin stem trembling in the wind like a child learning to stand. She knelt beside it, hand steady, eyes soft. The locket hung low around her neck, glinting every time sunlight slipped between the clouds. "Are you ready?" I asked. She nodded. We poured the last of the water together, not just over the soil, but over everything that had ever grown between us. For a long moment, we said nothing. The wind did the talking, weaving through leaves, brushing against our faces like a benediction. Somewhere beyond the fence, a child's laughter carried through the air. It was faint, but it was there, and both of us heard it. She smiled, not the poised smile from photographs, but the kind that comes from inside. "I think he's home," she whispered. I looked up at the sky, a wide, endless blue, the same color as the ribbon she wore on her wrist. "Yes," I said quietly. "He always was." The sapling swayed again, a small heartbeat against the horizon. And I realized something. Some lives don't grow upward. They grow through us. The days pass differently now. She visits every week, always bringing fresh flowers and stories about the children her foundation helps. Their names fill her mouth the way love once filled mine, fully, freely, fearlessly. I've stopped counting years. Time no longer frightens me. It just moves, like wind through leaves, carrying laughter, forgiveness, and the faint perfume of roses. And when I sit by that garden in the evenings, tea in hand, the locket glimmering in the distance, I can almost hear a child's voice call out from somewhere just beyond sight, bright, familiar, eternal. It doesn't sound like goodbye anymore. It sounds like home. And that's what truth does. In the end, it turns graves into gardens, wounds into roots, and silence into songs, because no matter how deep the loss, no matter how long the hiding, love always finds a way to bloom again. You've listened long enough to know this. Life rarely gives us perfect endings. It gives us honest ones. And honesty, my dear, is harder, but it's the only thing that lasts. For years, I thought silence made me strong, that if I just kept my pain quiet, it would forget my name. But silence never forgets. It waits. It grows roots in your ribs. And one day, when it blooms, it demands to be seen. That night on the stage wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about loss. It was about choosing truth over the comfort of pretending. When you've carried secrets long enough, you start mistaking the weight for your spine. And the day you let them go, you don't collapse. You stand taller. I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you give after the pain fades. It's what you give so it can. It doesn't mean what happened was right, it means you're done letting it own you. We all have a Daniel. Someone we lost too soon, or a part of ourselves we buried to survive. And maybe, like me, you've spent years trying not to say their name out loud. Say it anyway. Whisper it if you must. Because love, when remembered, stops being grief. And if there's someone you've shut out, a mother, a daughter, a friend, don't wait for the perfect moment. There isn't one. Truth doesn't care about timing. It just cares that you're brave enough to open the door when it knocks, because one day, you'll realize what I did. That peace doesn't come from hiding your story. It comes from owning it. And when you finally do, you'll see that all the broken pieces you were ashamed of were never your scars, they were your seeds. So if you take anything from me, take this. Don't protect your pain, release it. Don't bury your love, speak it. And don't wait for the world to understand you, understand yourself first, because in the end, when the lights dim, and the noise fades, and the world stops clapping, the only thing that will ever matter is how truthfully you loved, and how gently you forgave. That's the secret I kept too long, and the story I finally learned to tell. Now it's yours. The truth will wait for you, but I hope you don't make it wait too long. You know, when I was younger, I thought life was about becoming someone worth remembering. But now I know it's about remembering the parts of yourself you tried too hard to forget. We spend so much of our lives trying to keep everything neat. Our homes, our names, our stories. But real life, the kind that heals you, isn't neat. It's cracked and uneven, and it leaks truth through the smallest places. Sometimes love doesn't look like holding on. It looks like opening your hand and trusting what was meant for you to find its way back when it's ready. And when it does, you'll see it's never really left. It's just been waiting for you to finally stop whispering your story and start living it. So if you're still carrying a silence, set it down tonight. If there's a name that trembles in your chest, say it out loud. And if there's someone you still love even after all the distance, even after all the years, forgive them. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. You see, forgiveness doesn't rewrite the story. It just lets you keep reading without pain. And when your truth finally meets the light, don't be afraid of what it shows you. You survived everything it hid. You can survive what it reveals, Because some truths don't break us, they free the voice we never knew was ours. So go on, my dear. Tell your truth, even if it trembles, even if no one claps. Tell it anyway, because one day, when the world grows quiet, and the noise has faded, and the lights have gone soft, you'll hear something beautiful rising from that silence. It's not regret. It's not fear. It's peace. Finally speaking your name.